Good afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing? Still some energy left? Nice, nice. Well, living in your own bubble. We have seen a lot of code today, a lot of nitty-gritty details, test-driven design, a lot of other things. And I hope I'm going to make it a little bit practical right now by talking about a bubble. First question, who likes working with legacy code? Some people do, that's nice. Who has been here at the second session? A project with like 100,000 of projects. Who would like to work with a project like that? Almost nobody. But hopefully after this session, when I ask the same question, maybe you'll think, I might try it. Because I'm going to show you some things that maybe will really help you working with legacy code. And that's what this is all going to be about. I will start with some introduction, show you also some code, do some live coding. Let's get started. And before I start, let's focus on my presentation. Just a very quick introduction, very short. My name is Jacob, as you already mentioned. I'm an agile coach, which means I'm doing like group things, technical things, a lot of things with teams and with organizations. I like to read a lot of books. If you want to follow me, you can find me on LinkedIn. And then we are going into the main topic. Whoa, now it's dark. If you have looked carefully already, maybe you can see a theme. We are going to talk about farms. We're going to talk about cows, phosphate rights, some very interesting details about farming. Does anybody of you ever worked in an agricultural business? There are some people. And a lot of people think, well, these are farmers, they just deal with cows and that's it. But actually, the agricultural domains are the most interesting domains I've ever worked with because they're really complex, they're really technology driven, they want to be on top of technology and also things like phosphate rights, carbon footprint, very interesting domain. So what I'm going to talk about is, and I want to introduce you to the domain I'm going to talk about by using the tool for the domain storytelling, which is, there's a workshop today. So sorry, if you like this tool, you can't go there anymore, but I will just show you how the domain works. What's happening, I'm not sure, is this readable? A little bit, okay. So what's happening? A farmer is using a farming management system in which he is managing his cattle, his information about his farm. When a new animal is born, he needs to enter it in the system, stuff like that. All this information is sent to the Dutch government because they want to know everything, because they want to save money, need to pay taxes, and also because we want to handle all these phosphates and carbon footprints in the right way. So all this data is sent to the government, and the government is called the Netherlands Agency. I always forget it because I only know the Dutch one. Netherlands Enterprise Agency, the RVO in Dutch. What they also do, these farmers, they make some authorizations for our system, so we can also track data from the government. So we will get all the information about farms, about cows, what's happening into our own system. And then we start processing these data because we want to know what type of cow is this? What type of farm do you have? Do we need to pay phosphate rights for this animal? Or do we have enough phosphate rights in our farm to buy more cows? Or maybe we should sell cows, or we can buy some phosphate rights from other farms. There's a lot of trading happening, and we want to know all this information so we can aggregate their information and use it in different systems. In this case, AgriValuate, which is used by accountants to make reports, yearly reports, daily reports, all kind of reports about the farms. But it's also used by dairy organizations, all kind of different organizations who are getting overall data about cows, about all these information. So this is the domain I want to talk about. Just draw a small square around it, because this is the application I needed to work on. This is kind of how it looks like. It's very simple. There's a very small code base, just maybe an API, and the rest is database. Stop sheeters, functions, very terrible software to work on, real legacy code. And then it happened. New features, new requirements were needed. Just when I came in working for this company, multiple different features were needed, but I'm going to focus on one because one is complex enough to explain what's happening. And this is about animal categories. So what happens? An animal is born on a certain type of farm. It can be a meat farm, it can be a milk farm, it can be a breeding farm. And depending on the type of farm, your animal gets a category, which goes from 100 to, well, and every number means you either need to pay phosphate rights or you don't need to pay phosphate rights. If you look at this table, which is in Dutch, now I'm going to do it this way. The left one is all the cows that you need to pay phosphate rights, and the right one is the ones you don't need to pay phosphate rights. So meaning maybe you have a calf that's born in a meat producing factory. It will only be, sorry to say, it will only live for 40 days, and then it's like it will be slaughtered because it's a calf, stuff like that. You don't need to pay. But milk cows who are living for a certain number of years, well, they will produce a lot of phosphate, so you need to pay. And it's an existing feature. It's store procedures of about, well, hundreds of lines of code. I don't know. Does anybody of you know even what a store procedure is or database function? Who uses them still? Yeah, 2 people. Yeah, they're not bad per se, but with hundreds of lines of code, they are really difficult to work with. So, and I'm not sure if this is readable. I guess so. Just a few problems. What happens? Every night we need to process all animals because maybe they are in a different age category and they get a different category number. Maybe they have moved on to a different farm. So every night we need to reprocess all categories of all animals. And I'm talking about almost all cows in the Netherlands in our database. Not all, but almost all farms were connected to our database. 50 million records, something like that. And we needed to process them every night by using store procedures, which is very hard to scale. And what happens in the beginning, it was finished around 7 or 6 o'clock in the morning. But while I came in, maybe some days it took till 10 o'clock in the morning to finish. And these accountants got mad because they started at 7:30 in the morning or even earlier, and they couldn't work because we locked our database and stuff like that. So they really want to speed up this whole process. Also, something like real-time processing, they started saying that, no, we don't need that. But when they heard that it's possible, they really wanted to have real-time data. Every time they change something, they want to know, okay, we can buy new cows or we can, whatever they wanted to know, and they don't want to wait till the next day. There was another feature coming in, which was about the determination of the farm type, meaning if your farm has certain characteristics, it might change in type, and if it changes in type, all your animals need to be reprocessed. So they really needed real-time processing because this was an ongoing process. Another problem, which I kind of stated already, it was really legacy software. It was store procedures, no documentation, no unit tests. You know, we have been hearing a lot of unit tests talk today. There were 0. And I don't even know if you can really write good tests for these legacy kind of database functions. And there was a little bit of an issue with the domain experts. There were a few domain experts which were the original developers. This application existed in 1994, and the original developers which we worked with started in 1994, meaning they were really, can I say old-fashioned? And they kind of moved on. They were really doing different things. They were not developing this application anymore. It was really long ago that they added new features, and they were not really willing to work with us to continue moving into this project. So what the company decided was to appoint an analyst to work with them, to help them move forward quickly, and then put the information to us and we should do the work. Well, that didn't work out. I think we all know things like this, like if you really want to do knowledge crunching to get the domain, you do it with a team. So gradually they really grasped, okay, this is not going to work because we needed to finish the new features in 3 months' time. 3 months' time, the analyst was just going way too slow. So a lot of problems, and I didn't even mention the complication of the domain, because it was really complicated. The demo I'm going to show you is just a very simplified version of it, because otherwise I'll be talking the whole day, because there's a lot of things happening with cows and all that stuff. So a really complex domain. So what did we start with? We started with something like specification by example. Does anybody know what that is? Just a few people. Specification by example is a way of writing specifications which you can automate. And I will show them in code later. But it really means that if you are going to have a conversation with your domain experts, just ask them, can you give me some examples? What does it look like? For example, how can I know what a cow, what its category is? And then they will start explaining, a cow will get born on a breeding farm, which means it is just being born, that's what I'm said. So that means it will be category 101. Then when it moves to a different farm of a different type, then it will be in this category. If it gives birth, it will be in this category. And that's how they explain how this works. And then it's always difficult because where do you start? And you start asking, can you give me a happy path? Give me just your 80% cow information. And they said, well, we don't have. Because we have so many different flows of data going. You know, the animals, they go abroad, they go to cow shows, they go to from farm to the other farm. Sometimes a father stops being a farmer and will start breeding, and they move some animals. They're just being dragged around everywhere. So maybe there's kind of a 20% category in which you can work on. So then we say, okay, give us just some simple specifications. And then we started kind of doing some reverse engineering about how does this work in the legacy software. And we wrote tests, acceptance tests. So we are doing putting the real things in the database and testing it. So for example, what is happening, an animal, I don't think this is readable, so I will just quickly give an insight in what's happening. When an animal is born, I need to create an animal in the database. I need to determine on what farm it is, connect it to that farm, give it the category, and an event. So there's like, when you look into the database, there's a cow table, there's a cow farm table, a farm table, and a cow events table. That's like 4 tables. Then when it gives birth, I'm not really interested in the cow that it gives birth to. I only want to know the first day that it has calved, because then it is going into a different category, and if it gives birth 5 times, 6 times, I don't care. I just want to know it has given birth on a certain date. So I will just add a new event saying this calf gave birth to this at this date, at this farm, and now it is this category. And when an animal dies, kind of the same. I said the end date of the animal, end date of the location, an end event, that's the end of the animal. And then we have departure and arrival. Kind of makes sense, I guess. You move it from one farm, so you end it there, put it to the new farm, you start it there. So, to sum it up, legacy code, database functions, database triggers, and we started writing specifications, which I am going to demonstrate right now. And now I have to switch to this one. I created a .NET project, but that's just for the demonstration purpose. This is a bit funny. And I just want to show this. So first of all, there's a trigger, database trigger. What happens? You insert a record in a database table, and the database table will trigger an event, and the event will handle all the incoming data. So if you go through this, and it's, as I said, I recreated this. The original functions were way larger, way more difficult, and way more ugly. But just to give you a grasp of what is happening, it will do some stuff. It will try to get farm details. It will start doing code. It will call different functions, because if you look here, somewhere there will be, it will calculate the age of the cow in days. It will try to get a new category version, stuff like that. And I can also demonstrate this by showing you the specifications I just talked about. So let me just show you some of these specifications. So this is a specification, which is, this language is called Gherkin. I will not go into this, but it's something very interesting. What it's saying is, I have an event. What does an event look like? Well, an event has a gender, a date of birth, a reason why this event is happening, a current UBN. UBN stands for unique business number, possibly a target UBN when it's moved to a different farm, and the date of the event. I add it to the table, then when it is added to the table, then it should be processed and it should generate some information, mainly an event in the database and a location in the database. So it should also add a cow, which I forgot to add here. I realize now, but so now I can test if my database function is working, because it's actually inserting data in the database, and I can run this. I have everything running. I will just run this. Just do it again. It's this one, and if you look carefully, you will see that it will start running and going to green. Going back to my website. Now this is just a sample website, but you can see there's one farm with one animal, and if I click on it, you can see the details of this animal. It's a random number, but it's a female on this date. It is born on a farm breeding for milk, and it only has one event, which is actually what I expected if you look at the specifications here. So that's what we did, and in this case I have about 300 lines of specifications. I can run them all. I saw that some of them are failing, but that's not really a problem now. And this is what we started to do, just getting a grasp of the domain, because we really didn't understand what was happening. No, they're all green, which is very nice. Okay, so that's the domain and the legacy software. But I think we spent some time working on this. I think we spent too long working on this, and we didn't solve any problem yet. In fact, we didn't even succeed in the 3 months that was given, because it was too complex, but at least, well, we did something. But now the question was, how are we going to move forward? How are we going to make this process faster? Are we going to rebuild? Well, not an option, because other applications are also using our legacy systems, and it's not only this part, but it's a way bigger system. Many other organizations are using our database, are using our APIs. It's just too dangerous, very costly. It will take us way much longer, but still we need to do something here. Does anybody of you ever heard of the bubble context? Just a few people. Well, many people know Eric Evans from the Blue Book, but Eric Evans also wrote a paper about the bubble context. And that's what I am going to talk about right now. And the bubble context is, well, as he wrote, a bubble context is a small bounded context established using an anti-corruption layer for the purpose of a particular development effort and not intended necessarily to be expanded or used for a long time. Well, that's a mouthful. So, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to explain this. I will just use this picture to show you what we are going to do. A bubble context is like you take an existing part or you take a new part and you extract it from your application and you build it alongside it. But you still use the same legacy database or whatever you use, but in this case, legacy database. So what we did is we started creating 2 bubbles, one for animals and one for farms. Farms, I just explained a little bit. I won't talk about it, just forget about farms. But we created an animal bubble. And what it does is it gets data it needs to do processing from the legacy database via an anti-corruption layer. And the anti-corruption layer in this case does translation from database models to my domain models, to my aggregates. And it also gets like some metadata I might need, like which categories are there, which farms are there. Just a little bit of information. I get it out, I do the processing, and I store the newly processed animal information via the anti-corruption layer. I translate it back to database models and write it there, which is a very neat way of working. There are some characteristics down there. You can do this it is like a DDD light, DDD for beginners, because you need to do, or you don't need to, you can do DDD in a small contained project, but you can just let the legacy software as is. Don't care much about it, just make sure you get your data out, write it back in the right way, and that's it. So you don't need to do full greenfield project DDD by the book, but you can just start with a small part. You can only do it if you don't need the whole database. You know, if you need all these 50 million records in memory to do the process, that won't work. In our case, it works because we only need a very little amount of data before we can start doing the processing. and no synchronization risk. As I said, a lot of other organizations are using our APIs. So if we start working on our normal application, it can be very dangerous. If something goes wrong, they all are in trouble. And now we just write it from the bottom, and everything looks like it's just still the same. So that makes it very easy and very safe. So some event storming after that, because we really wanted to see what is happening in our newly formed animal bubble context. The purple one is an external system, which is the government, which is pushing events to our application. I already stated the events, so like new animal born, an animal has been moved to another farm, it has calved or died, and they go into commands and eventually new domain events, and that's how it looks like. There's another system, scheduled job to do nightly processing or hourly processing or whatever you want to see if an animal has changed. Like if it's his birthday today, then it might get into a new category. Or, well, if something happens on the farm that the government doesn't know yet, we can still do some processing. I blurred the bubble context, but what happens in the farm bubble context, what happens there is if a farm changes, we need to reprocess all animals on that farm. So there's a line going to the other bubble context, which is just a domain event saying, hey, I'm farmed this, I've changed, please recalculate your animals. And that's it. So there's a boundary there, but they're really two bounded contexts, different projects, actually. So the animal bubble context, what we did here, as I said, is this is an existing piece of software. So what are we going to do? We are going to use the strangler fig pattern. Who's familiar with the strangler fig pattern? Quite some people. Simon, who is sitting over there, is from Australia, and he told me it's Ken Beck who came up with the strangler fig pattern when he was sorry. Martin Fowler, sorry. When he was in Australia, he saw this happening. It's kind of a vine that grows around the tree and kind of strangles it. It takes all the light of it, takes all the resources of it, and finally the tree dies and the vine is staying there in the same form. And that's what we did. We recreated exact same software in a new bubble. But the output of it should be the same. And which was very convenient. Our specs, which we wrote, should be the same too. So we could reuse our specs, start building the new bubble with new software, greenfield project, and then test if our tests are still the same. Because we will put it in a queue, which I will show you later, put it in a queue, process it, and expect exact same results as we did with the database function. So that's very cool, a very cool process to do the strangler fig project. The pattern doesn't have anything to do with DDD, but it is cool if you are working with legacy software. And I think if you read Working with Legacy Code, it's there. Some other books also say, well, this is a very good pattern to start working with legacy code. As I said, we introduced a queue, so we could do per farm on-demand processing instead of doing everything in the database, which is very hard to scale. And it was kind of easy. As long as we knew what to do on the domain, it was kind of easy. So let's go and live in our own bubble and start doing some code here. Which I'm still should have mirrored my screen and I didn't. Let me go to my first one. I just want to be sure. Yes, I just thought I have something more to say, because what is my goal? I want to demonstrate what does the anti-corruption layer looks like, because it's a very important part of a bubble context. Not only a bubble context, because you can also use it for other domain-driven design patterns. The data flow inside the bubble, I have implemented a few handlers to show you, okay, how does it look like? And at the end, I want to implement the last flow to show you, okay, now it's completely working and all specs should run as expected, hopefully. So that's the goal. And then I'm going to do that on here. So first of all, let me show you that I'm using the same specs. And as I said, I kind of recreated the project, so I'm not really using one project. I wanted to create one project with the same specs and just change what I'm doing with it, putting it in the queue or not, but I just decided to copy them and made a little change, especially in this line. I'm adding it to the queue. Well, they are the same scenarios. Where's my... I have a question. A lot of people are using dark screens. Is this better readable? Or it doesn't really matter? Because it seems like this is better readable, right? It seems like I'm not seeing my screen right. There's some things there which I don't see, because I guess it's because it's white. I don't know. I don't really know what's happening. Anyway, I will just run all these tests and see what happens. So what this does, it puts one or more events in a queue. I put a little bit of a delay in it because like this one, my mouse is on top. Like on this one, it has two events. An animal is born and an animal dies. Not on the next day. So it's born today, it will die tomorrow. These events normally come in sequence. They don't come all the way around. So I put a little bit of a delay in it, so I'm sure that the animal is created before I do new processing. And that's how it actually also works with the government. Sometimes farmers enter events later on, but normally they come into our system in sequence, which is nice and really helps. It's also an interesting thing. As you can see, some of these tests are really long running because I'm using a queue. So I'm using running into a little bit issue of eventual consistency. When I put these things in my queue, they are not processed at the same moment. It takes a while. Well, this is a test environment, so I just put a retry mechanism and just test a few times if you did the processing. But if you are actually doing this on maybe an acceptance environment, this might not work because you're not sure if it will process in time. But in this case, it's all local and it works. As you can see, only a few tests are succeeding. I also added some, maybe I will just very quickly try and see if I can quickly mirror it. Well, I can't. Well, I'm not going to try anyway. I also wrote some unit tests because these acceptance tests take a long time, and I think we were just hearing that you want fast running tests so you can have a very fast flow. And as you can see in my application layer, I have a few failing tests. There's something with a reason handler factory, and there's something with a departure handler. That's what I explained at the end. I want to implement this at the end. But let me first show you how my application works. Well, what happens if an event enters into the queue? There's a worker with a subscription to a, in this case, RabbitMQ. And the moment it consumes a new event, it will start pushing it to an event handler. And then we start doing some anti-corruption layer work. And that's where I wanted to go, because I want to explain what does this do. But in this case, there's an event coming in, and I will just tell the database, the legacy, give me all your categories you have so I can do my own determination in my new bubble. And the second thing is, give me all the farms that are involved. So maybe the farm that the animal is on right now, or where it is born, and maybe the farm where it is going to. Give me all the information about the farm, and that's all I need, so that I can do my own work and then leave the legacy database as is. My anti-corruption layer. Let me just show you how that looks like. Well, there's like a repository. I think you all know the repository pattern for cows and for farms. And then I have a few methods. Let me just go back to the interface. By life number, every cow gets a life number from the government. It has to do with these yellow earrings it has. And then I have two other methods. I have a save animal and I have an update animal. And how does it look like? And maybe I will start with save. Doesn't really matter. What this does is it translates. It will first get my farm information, and then it translates my animal, because I'm using the terminology animal, which I will talk about in a bit, and I will transfer it into a cow object, which is actually a database object. What I just said about the animal is something is interesting, because while we were working with this application, it was in Dutch, but still they were using two different languages. The old developers thought this application is going to do everything with cows, and the domain experts were still hoping that one day they might use it for other animals like sheep or goat. So they were talking about animals and not cows. So we also started using the word animal or dieren in the database. So in our bubble you will see a complete different language than in the legacy database, in the legacy code that was there. And something else we did is we switched from English to Dutch. Are there Dutch people here? How many of you are using Dutch in your programming language, your domain language, your code? How many people hate it when they see that? Nice. Okay, that's what a problem. I had the same problem. I didn't really get into a fight, but almost, because I started using Dutch, and the whole team started using Dutch, and the old developers really didn't like it because they did it in English, and now it's in two languages. But I was really happy. Although this is all English, because this is a recreation of the domain. So what's happening? I am going to convert an animal into a cow. That's what an anti-corruption layer in this case do. It just make sure, can I store this in my legacy database? It will set some. It will convert animal events to cow events, it will animal locations to farm locations, and then save it to the database, in this case using entity framework. I think we did it in the original project also, yes. We did. So that's the save method. The update method is almost doing the same, but it will just look if there are some changes in the locations and animals, and does it need to write anything down, and it will do that. So there's a little bit more code, and then it will just do an update statement. And there's one more, which is the get by life number. It's just the same. Get an animal from the database by life number. Try to get it from the original method and transform it into a cow. Okay. So that's how this looks like. Now I'm going to back to my code and show you what's happening right here. First of all, as I said, I'm going to the event consumer. The event consumer is going to a handler. Then the anti-corruption layer comes in, and then we have a factory, which is actually just an ordinary factory, not a domain factory, but just an ordinary factory, which creates a handler for the event I want to handle. So I've already implemented a birth handler, a calf handler, and a death handler, but not a departure and arrival handler, which I will implement in a bit. But first of all, let me move into the birth handler. C#, I think you can all read this, right? There won't be any problem there. And you also all know the factory method. I'm not even going to ask. If not, read it. So the birth handler, what the birth handler does, it uses a animal birth factory, which is actually a domain factory. And domain factory, what it does is it makes sure that it can create a aggregate. So it will check if everything is valid before I can create my domain object. It's a little bit different from my normal factory, but it's very much used if you want to create difficult objects or, as you know, maybe in the DDD it's stated that a domain object should also always be valid. So in the factory you can check, can I create a valid object or not? And then I can throw or do whatever I want. Well, anyway, I have a birth factory which does something very simple. It will perform a birth, which is a bit funny, but well, I had to come up with a name, and this felt better than we used create animal, but I'm not creating animals. Well, I'm not also performing birth, but well, this creates a new animal. It connects it to the farm. It creates categories and then returns an animal. Let me just show you what happened. It's very simple because in the beginning, the animal is just nothing. It's just a life number, a gender, and a date of birth, and that's it. That's all I need for a new animal. So if you remember the flow, I should have it somewhere here. Where is it? Here. That's this flow. I create a cow, I link it to the farm, I determine the category, and I create a cow event. Very simple. The second one is not implemented. The calved handler is different because then I need to get an animal from the database. So I'm using the anti-corruption layer again to say to the database, give me your animal information. Let me create an existing animal with the same factory. No, not with the same factory. I do that with the anti-corruption layer. And then I start handling the domain object method handle first calved, which is actually also very simple. Just saying, okay, today or this date, this animal gave birth, and I also need to determine which category is involved in this event. Maybe I will also demonstrate what this looks like. I have a list of categories from my anti-corruption layer, and categories are basically a list of gender, age in days, type of farm, and if it has given birth or not, and if it's male or female, maybe something about that. So that's what it does. It just matches, do I have a rule that fits? And then I have a category. If I don't have a category, I probably don't need to pay phosphate rights, so I will just return a 0 and that's it. In fact, most of the time I'm only interested in matching categories for which I need to pay phosphate rights. The other categories are not really interesting for this use case. Yeah. But that's what's happening. So I just match it. If I don't have it, return a 0. Okay. And that is the third flow. The fourth flow, the handle death. Kind of the same thing. Just saying, okay, the animal is, give me the animal, set the date of death, set the end date of the farm, set the, create a category, that's it. It's the end of the animal. Okay. Let me quickly move into this. And first of all, as I said, I have some failing tests. Just run them again. And I want to work on this one first. I want to create the handler, because that sounds like an easy test. And first of all, what I will do here is I will remove this. And that will be the departure handler. And I did some preparation, so it is the basics are there, animal characteristics. Oh. And if we jump into this method, you'll just see it will throw a not implemented exception. But at least if I look into the unit tests, probably where are they? Here they are. I did something funny now, but I don't know what. Well, that was the end of Rider. No, normally people say that's because you use Linux. No, it's not. You were thinking it. There it is again. Well, it's unique. I never have crashing Rider, in fact. Sorry? Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Just today. Sorry? No, I don't use internet at all. No network. Anyway, now it will start building and then it will be green. Oh, that's funny. That shouldn't be all green. Anyway, let me just not linger too much there. Let me go into the handler itself. Calved hand, no, the departure handler. Now it's crashing again. That's what I was expecting. Okay, so what do we need to do now? I have a animal. I need to get the cow details. I need to know what the last category is, because when an animal is moved from one farm to the other, the moving event, it will just get the last category. Nothing has changed. But when it gets into the new farm, I need to get a new category. So last known category, set the end date of the current location, get the destination farm details, link it to the destination, get new category, stuff like that. Let me just do it step by step. So the first thing I said is I need to get the cow details. And I have an animal repository. By live number, and I have a incoming event which should have a live number in it. Well, there it is. Step 1. I know what animal I'm working with via the anti-corruption layer again. Maybe before I go into further details, I will show you what this does. The tests are not really nice to see because there's a lot of things going on. And I'm using mocks because I'm not working with a real database. That's what I'm doing with these specifications. So I am just, what I said, making a mock for the cows, making a farm repository, getting an animal, and then saying, okay, I have a new departure. And then what I'm verifying, and this is more interesting than the setup part, I'm verifying that the cow has some details. Okay, it has a live number, that it has, in this case, a date of birth, and it should have a certain number of events. Because I'm moving it, it should have a departure event and an arrival event. So that's 3 events: birth, arrival, departure. In the other way around. So, and then I'm going to verify, okay, that means the first event should be a birth, then a departure, then an arrival. And I'm also saying, okay, I'm expecting it to have category 101, category 101, category 102, because it is older than 1 year. That's why it's category 102. Not really important, but and it should have 2 locations, the first farm and the farm it has moved to. That's what I'm expecting. It's not working right now, and that's what I wanted to create. So going back to my screen again. Cow details, last known category. That's something that I have, and I just want to quickly departure current farm, destination farm. I need to know details of my current farm. Where that should be unique business number should equals the incoming event. And then the current UBN. Okay. Something is going wrong here. This is not, no, this is not. And then I need to know the target UBN, target farm. Let me call it farm. The first of default. Equals incoming event test. What is it called? Target UBN. Okay. Just quickly, animal, okay. And then I need to handle my arrival and departure event with some details there. Let me just quickly copy this and show you that works. And then go to my animal. It's a bit funny working with this. Your head switched all the time. Because that method might not be there, or I just used the wrong name. I'll just copy my example code. And then it should be all there. Let me just build it. No. Oh, this white screen. Terrible. What did I just do? I think I know what I did, but paste. And now I hope I do build. Sometimes it refuses to build because I'm running the whole project in the background. So I'll just cancel it. Just to show you what I'm doing. I'm using something called Thai. I don't know if anybody knows Thai, but it's for .NET projects, and it's a bit like Docker Compose, but different. And it runs my actual project, so I don't need to do Docker build or stuff, but it will just run the actual projects. But because they are running, sometimes it's hard to build your project, and you get some issues there. But now it should build, and let me test it, and hopefully all green. So now my whole flow is working. So if I look now, I have implemented this whole step and I have a completely functioning application, but I'm not sure yet. I think I only have a few more minutes left, so I will be fast. What I'm not sure yet is, does it really work? So all these features, which are going to push my data into the queue, let's also run them and see if they were all green now, because they were not in the beginning. And as I said, they are an actual copy of the legacy specification. So if this runs, I'm sure that my new bubble has exactly the same output as my old legacy database functions. Let me just enlarge this a bit. And as I said, it takes a while, and I can even demonstrate some of them. Maybe this one. So here you can see there's a cow with a lot of history. It went even to a slaughterhouse, but it's not dead yet. Let me get a dead animal. This one has been slaughtered, so this one has an end date, and this is just an animal that has been through the whole stage of life. Let me quickly, I think that was okay. Just some of my key takeaways while using the bubble, and also future directions, which is also very interesting, because if you have this bubble there, and if you read Eric Evans' paper, he really goes into detail here, but you have a bubble context and you also have an autonomous bubble context. And the difference is, you can see my anti-corruption layer in this case, kind of like a biblical cord. And with a autonomous bubble context, you cut a biblical cord and you give the autonomous bubble context its own database. So in my example, what I could have done is, I might get some farm data and some category data from my original legacy database, but I will store my newly processed animals in my new database. So I will start creating a real bounded context, a real application on itself. And then what you can gradually move on, and then maybe at a certain point say, okay, we are not touching the legacy application anymore. We just create some APIs, we request some data, push it into the bubbles, and hopefully at the end we can forget about the legacy, or maybe it will be there as some kind of asset store, and that's it. And that's the last thing is, you start expanding your bubbles and only work on your bubbles and do the stuff right and proper DDD. Key takeaways. Maybe I should start with the question: if you see this, do you think you could actually use this on a legacy system you are working on? Who thinks he could use this in modernizing their applications? I see some hands there. Working with legacy code is actually quite cool, and I think we should do more with it, because we all like to build greenfield projects, but they are not legacy for a reason. Maybe we are even the ones who did it. And giving software a larger lifetime is really interesting, and it's also very interesting to use the bubble to do that. You can create new bubbles, more bubbles, and then give your legacy domain a longer lifetime. It's also nice, in this case we had two bubbles. We could have worked with two teams. We could have created some value stream teams, like in the team topology kind of way, and really create autonomous teams who are working on a bounded context and expanding the whole application in that way. Ubiquitous language, I already talked about it. I really enjoyed using Dutch in my application, and I was not the only one. And one of the fun things was that I had a domain expert, an accountant, knew nothing about programming, but he could sit next to me and he could tell me, you're doing it wrong, because your flows here, there's something wrong there, because I was using Dutch. I was just using, like, when an animal dies, very long function names, but he could reason with me about code. And he did that a few times, and I really liked using Dutch in my code. And in fact, I've moved on to a different company. We are still doing the same, even though we are working with English people. We create a glossary with domain language, and they should learn the domain language in Dutch, and they can use English in conversations, but they should know the words. And specification by example, which I just touched a little bit. This is a very nice subject, and it was really strong because we had a lot of specifications, maybe around 1,000 or even more, which we just copied and reused, and then we were sure that the database was still the same. Well, we also did some other things, because in the beginning we wrote it into a separate table and then did compare before we moved on to the real database. But specification by example, it was really interesting. No, I don't think we have time for questions. And then I have to say thanks for listening. I have a repository there, and if you want to see the repository, my slides are there. My LinkedIn link is there, so if you want to contact me, if you have questions, you can contact me later also. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a nice day.